Excellent, thank you. Good morning. It is, what is today? April 28th, and this is a special meeting of the Board of Education Communications Committee. Our next meeting is Friday, May 26th at 8:30 a.m. And we will get right down to business. Thanks for being here early, everyone. Dr. Adley, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Dennis, good morning to you. Sure.
Good morning. Good morning.
So what we have, thank you from our last meeting. What we said we would try and do is populate sort of the communications that were actually taking place from the Board of Education, or populate the communications that were taking place from the administration. So the sort of first agenda item touches on that. The second agenda item touches on a development of the survey. So we a draft survey to discuss today. So what you have is essentially that the board responds back to the types of the communications and the administration's feedback on the communications. I think the intent of what we would do with this is spend just a wee bit of time this morning if there's any questions, or otherwise there may be things that are missing inadvertently or otherwise, but it gives you a general overview. And I think this probably would become part of the documentation and data that would go along with focus groups and so on when we do those in the next level, which would be in the fall. But for now, they've been populated and they're just for our consideration.
Great. Do we want to take a look at it or talk through it a little bit? I think you had a few questions in there for us to consider in looking at it.
Yes, I just tried to look and see if, just to frame the discussion a little bit, that do the templates actually reflect the communications that are happening both at a board level and a administrative level from the schools and from central services. We know that communication is, the nature of communication is not just push out, that it's twofold. And is there a sense that it reflects a two-way nature of the communication and feedback from people? And is there any other notable patterns, anything's missing or otherwise, or anything for comment that the board members, either on the board template or on the administrative template? So I was certainly open up for just sort of general, good morning, general sort of comments and so on at this point.
Awesome. Go ahead, John.
This is, I mean, an amazing list from the schools. I mean, when I say amazing, lengthy. It shows the breadth of communications, the different forums, and same goes for the Board of Ed, but much more confined, which it should be. The only question I had, and again, how deep we want to go. You call out some athletic, DHS athletic accounts, but their individual teams also have some communications, and if I kind of think through, and I haven't done an inventory of it, but I think there's some clubs and theater, and I don't know if they're all listed. Yeah. So I don't know how deep we want to go on that front. But I run the DHS football account, right? So I know there's a DHS lacrosse account. I think the coach runs it. So I don't know if there's a way we can take an inventory of that kind of second layer.
Mm-hmm. And that might add in a little more variety of that. Some of our more informal, maybe, or less structured communication, probably from the district. Like it's a little more social media. Yeah. I think it's a little
highlighting pictures, events. It's not really official business, if you will, but highlighting the group.
Right.
Group's activities, if you will.
Right. Which is great. No, it's a good point.
On that subject, though, having not had an athlete or theater at the high school, well, I have an athlete, having not received that type of team parent communication. Are there, I understand there's like fun, also like uniform communications and team dinners and dollars. So some of it, I'm curious about the line between formal and informal, because I think some of it does highlight, but my understanding is there's some direction, but I'm not sure.
Well, like the DHS athletics social media is probably where I get 80% of my information about how our sports teams are doing. So
okay.
while I'm calling it less formal because it's social media, but that's probably not
Yeah.
fair. It's still pretty comprehensive and pretty intentional.
Yep.
I think there are captains lists,
that's
like,
what I'm asking
you know, I
about,
get
yeah.
a lot of text messages about from the tennis team, but that's parents for the most part communicating about a team dinner and that's my athletics experience. Clubs, I think also some more than others have a pretty regular social media presence and
Yeah.
lean on that pretty heavily for communication.
Yeah.
And then there certainly are emails also to club membership parents as well as students, I think. So
Okay.
there's a
teams,
variety
yeah.
and teams. Yeah, same deal.
So maybe when we talk about extracurriculars, want to break that into those buckets,
Yeah.
kind of how we talk about the programs. And usually that's on social media from a sort of a success or accomplishment point of view. I do think there's direction from coaches, and I do think there's some types of direction from captains, parents, or other parents. So it might be nice to understand the universe of what's happening in those three buckets, whether or not, I don't mean today, but that might be an area to explore.
Well, look, if you have, for instance, there's a National Honor Society, right?
Right.
So if you extrapolate that a little bit further to the extracurriculars and so on, I think we can get generalized notifications. I mean, maybe I don't think we're competing one versus the other, but generalized things that come from the school or the coach or
Yeah.
I think we could probably expand upon that a little bit.
Okay.
Yep, that's
you.
perfect. That's exactly.
Dennis, anything you want to jump in with?
Yeah, I'm struggling with this last point. I think we're getting, for me, I think we're getting, at least from what I'm hearing, is we're getting too in the weeds of communication between amongst teams and things like that. Is that what we're trying to go after as well?
I was
Or-
trying to say, Dennis, that I think that there are types of what I would call semi-official communications. So certain types of fundraising, for example, we're all going to buy the same gloves. You don't have to, but it's kind of semi-official. Or team parents might be communicating about certain types of scheduling things. So I just would like us to understand the lines. And so I think I don't think that we have to prescribe. I don't think we have to capture everything. I just think we want to understand how communication is working today. And we can decide if we're happy with it the way it is, or we want to say, look, anything that is of a official to semi-official nature comes from the coach because X, Y, Z.
Yeah, let me give you a real-time example, Dennis. Like there's the walk this weekend, right? So teams are participating as a group to do the walk at the high school. So the email goes out from the coach to the teammates, right? Just again, we're not trying to regulate it or prescribe it or anything like that. This is an accounting list or an inventory list, and just try to list some of those communications below the assistant athletic director of athletics who runs the DHS athletics account. That's kind of what we're getting.
No, it's fair. I just think I think we're getting very granular at this point of talking amongst teams. And I think we should look more, I don't want to say 40,000 feet, but maybe 1,000 feet, and just do communication from the district to the majority of parents, as opposed to each specific sports team or club or something like that. I think that's finite. That's really going to be, I mean, I think we have to get a handle on 1,000 feet before we go down to 1 foot. Just my personal opinion.
It's a good caution. I think we should be careful not to get too in the weeds. I think having examples of all the kinds of things that there are, but not being overly concerned with a completely exhaustive list of everything and every coach's method and every club, leaders, mess, et cetera, just to make sure that we have the scope, but not necessarily a full, complete everything.
Well, with your
inventory.
understanding, I'm going to try and thread that needle by not citing every example of the actual nature of it.
Exactly. Perfect.
Yeah, understood.
Okay,
I think
clear.
that's great.
Thank you.
I wanted to say thank you to all the people who did populate this district and board. It's super helpful. And there is some really interesting stuff in here. I had a couple observations that I will just share for discussion or to think about. Regarding whether or not this is an accurate reflection, to my knowledge, it is for the most part. I just wanted to clarify, there is a mention here and there of PTO meetings. Some of those that are listed are exec board meetings, I think. I don't think schools are having monthly PTO meetings for like the whole community, but PTO members meet with school leadership on a regular basis, or PTO leadership meets with school leadership. There are also a couple things that I think are avenues available to us, and now I'm speaking to the Board of Ed list, but I don't know that we've used them, or maybe we haven't used them recently. So Not to say that they shouldn't be included because these are things we can do, but I don't think we've done a clarification of board action via various email. That might have been it. A joint communication, I don't think we've done in a while unless we're just kind of speaking at a macro level, but I don't think we've sent an email that's a
We,
joint
we
communication.
have, yeah, we did, Alan Duke did one with Monica.
I'm
a couple
sorry.
times.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's chair and super, okay, but chair and or whole board.
yeah, so I just wanted to leave that open to, it could be chair of the Board of Ed, first selectman. I think in one case it was the chief of police and maybe, and Alan, I believe that was a 4. So what I'm the one that put that in. I wanted to leave open that it might be a variety of stakeholders depending on what the situation is.
Yep.
Yeah. But there are times where we would go out with fellow.
That's great.
Yeah.
The other, to that point, sort of just observations and looking at all of this, some of these are things that we do on an informational basis, like a regular, we need to push info out. And some of this is reactive. And I'm not sure that we
Yes.
need to tease that out in any way, but these are just things that struck me in reviewing this.
Yep.
There's not a tremendous amount of interactivity in most of this. Most things are things you can respond to, but not designed to be an interaction. That's across the board. Not that that's wrong, but that's something to consider. The newspaper piece being quoted in the paper, et cetera, that just struck me as something that we can't necessarily manage or control, except we can manage what we say, but we can't always manage how or where it's used.
In the context or the
Exactly, the way it's put forth.
or the titles of the or headlines of the piece.
Headlines. Yeah.
Not a ton of variety. I think we knew we would see that. A lot of meetings that can be attended or watched and a lot of email. So that's something we might think about, but there's also some really good pieces to that, which is email is something you can search, you can organize, you can put things in folders, you can refer back to versus, a text message, for example. If you looked at my text inbox, if there's such a thing, it's a disaster because I just keep everything. So there are some nice features to using what we use. The meetings that are recorded, you can go back to them, et cetera. And again, very little social media, as we just discussed. There is more social media activity that goes on, not presently all captured here, but we do have very little social media presence in general. So just a few thoughts.
And that's something in the future we should look at.
Yeah, and these are things maybe not so much for the survey, but more as we move into the focus group phase to probe some of these things to get a better read on how is it working for you that you get 10 emails a week, maybe from DPS and school related things. And it might be working just fine. So
yeah,
just wanted to call those out. Anybody else have any thoughts or?
Yeah, I have a couple things.
Jill does. Okay, great.
Yeah, so a couple things you said, the clarification of board action. I added that in there because the board has not had a cohesive way of doing that. So I think we need to acknowledge that while it is reactive, every so often, we may find ourselves in a situation where the board wants to provide further explanation. So it may be worth deciding, we want to say this is our path, or it may be worth leaving it as various media. But I just, having sat here twice where we had a non-cohesive response to board action, it's something I would like for us to make sure that we're ready for so it can be addressed.
Or inaction.
Or inaction, yeah, so that may need to be clarified too, but action or inaction, yes. The one thing that isn't on here that I think we could discuss where it goes, whether it goes under Board of Education or under district, is the concept of a town hall and kind of to that question of two-way. I know this is not the gospel, but at the CABE communications presentation I went to, they talked about doing town halls, but they typically did them at the district level as opposed to at the board level. We have done, I think, both here in town in my time. I think probably it does belong at the district level because anything we've talked about at the board level probably belonged really actually at the district level. If we look back, like when we talked about cheating, I think if I had that to do over again, I might say that probably belonged at a town hall at the high school. We don't have to, you can agree or disagree, but I think that concept we want to put somewhere in here and talk about where we might use something like that. That is an example of a more interactive. The last piece, again, just for the communities, excuse me, the communication committee's information. When we talked about social media, we talked about that really being owned by the district versus the Board of Ed because of the nature of board work. So anything official, really, the recommendation out of that group was that be managed by the district. So just something we can agree or disagree, but something to put in the back of your mind. Last piece, staying away, Dennis, to your point, is staying away from granular. But the other thing at the elementary school is the room parent, just acknowledging that type of communication exists. But it is a regular source of communication for parents.
But that, okay, I mean, that draws the line where we tried to stay away from outside groups. So are you saying that room parents are basically in school kind of communication?
They're in school. It's usually between teacher and room
Okay,
parent, and it
perfect.
has to do with, things that the classroom needs or somebody
Okay,
to
so it's
volunteer and come
coordinating
in.
with the
Right.
Yeah.
district. Okay,
Coordinating the
perfect.
holiday
Then I
celebration.
agree 100%.
Yeah, and again, I agree, Dennis. I like your point of not trying to get too granular, but I also just want to acknowledge it's a form of communication parents receive.
No, totally agree.
On the town hall piece, just to add, Dr. Adley, I know you have at times during budget season early on gone to all the schools for kind of a more casual conversation about your budget initiatives that you're putting forth. And that's a nice example of taking the work to another location to have a more informal discussion with constituents. So let's capture that thought too.
Mhm.
Okay, cool.
That's been done for, budgets, for building committees, for
Yeah, yes,
new
building committees,
initiatives.
exactly.
We just recently did it for the SSOs, but I remember Dr. Brenner doing it for something or other. So, there's something we have a history of doing.
All right, great. Anything else from you, Dennis?
None for me.
John, you good?
I'm good.
All right.
So on this, we can come back just if we revise with some of the comments today. The thing, what do you want me to do? Capture? We can either keep this just in our running record here, or we can blend it into this. So something like the town halls. It's hard to discuss this and not go into what we might want to do more of or otherwise. Does it belong in the template recorded, or do you want me to hold it out?
I would include some of those examples of town halls that we have done in here,
Okay,
just so we
all right.
have that piece of it. And then what I would hope is that as we field the survey, not to jump the gun, but as we get the survey out and get those results in, we'll look at survey results and look again at this to help inform how we want to prepare for focus groups and the next steps. But this is great. Thank you very much.
And you said this already, Julie, but to the staff also.
Yes.
Alan, because this is a lot of work.
Yes.
It's you too much. Yeah.
Absolutely. On to the survey.
I'll let Marge talk about this. She was the one who put it together. Appreciate all of her efforts here. And Marge.
Thank you. So there are a bunch of sample surveys online. So we looked at what I think would fit best in the community. We did get some additional feedback from Julie and Jill, and it can all be changed.
Just before you comment, Marge, can you just fill her in about the background on Hanover or
Panorama.
Oh, Panorama, we did reach out to Panorama and they said that a single-use survey with a limited number of questions would be prohibitively expensive for them to do. They do ongoing tracking of school climate and things like that. So they suggested get a Google form and do it yourself.
Excellent. So as Marge said, we did go through this the other day and it seemed pretty straightforward and comprehensive. Sorry, Alan.
No,
Good job. Go ahead.
No, we made the couple of reasons that we received and feedback, and the intent, I think, Marge, would be to administer this in the next, probably maybe even next week, because by the time you get into the swing of things, and that would allow us to get it back again for potentially our May meeting.
Mm-hmm. We were thinking that it would come from Dr. Adley, hopefully, to district and families with a response requested, try to drive some urgency, and we're trying to keep it simple intentionally. We'd like to get more responses. The more responses, the better, and keep it straightforward. But would love to hear if anybody sees anything they have questions on or anything that are missing, et cetera.
I would just say, let's use our partners in the parent teacher organizations and, to advertise this thing.
To encourage,
Yeah,
great point.
really encourage participation.
Excellent point. Dennis?
No, I think John's point's perfect. We need, I think we need as much data as we can get to formulate this plan, because honestly, I keep going back to something Dave said is, I think we're over, his point was, I think we're over communicating. When you look through the slides of how much communication there's 5 slides. I mean, it's a lot of communication, or a lot of communication vehicles.
Marge, I
So-
appreciate, I'm sorry, finish, Dennis.
No, I'm just curious to see how parents react and see how it plays out. I'm very interested.
What I appreciate about the survey, thank you, is that we're looking at the type of communication, the frequency of communication, the method of communication. We're also looking at different types of websites that we use to communicate with parents, trying to really capture the universe and really get a meaningful flavor from parents. We went with being a little more comprehensive versus narrow, really trying to set ourselves up for what are the key questions we're going to be asking going forward. So it is not a super short survey, although it should be easy to take. But I think I appreciate that we've tried to look at different aspects of communications in it.
I think the only thing that, question 14, which asks about the satisfaction with portals. So we tried to brainstorm the portals, if anyone,
If we're missing any.
because you use them more than we do. So if there's anything
Yeah.
that you think to add to that, we'd be happy to do it.
Well, there's the pay.
My school bucks, Aspen and
So-
Family ID.
Pay for school, there's one that's used exclusively by the PTOs, but not by the district. So we left that out.
Okay,
And school cash online is going away. So we took.
so we
that out.
didn't,
And
okay,
that's, you're right. And my school bucks is lunch, right? Family ID is mostly athletics.
Yes.
And Aspen.
Do you want to put an NA on there? Like option, can you put an NA, not applicable if they don't?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Good idea.
sorry to at this level, but by my school bucks, you want to put lunch? Because if I look at this, I wouldn't know what you're talking about. I can't remember what's called what.
Right. And it was lunch prepay. It's
Yes.
been a few things.
Yes.
That's probably a good
I
idea.
don't know what family ID is either. as a
Yeah,
parent.
you might want to just put it in
Yeah.
parentheses, because when I take these things, I'm like, oh, should I know this? And then you just kind of make up an answer because you think you should put an answer in, but so then
Right.
it becomes totally irrelevant.
You don't want to ask. You don't want to admit to not knowing.
Mm-mm.
Got it. Awesome. And I look forward to the answers to question 19.
You think if there's anything missing that we're like?
Uh,
think we've got that.
I tried to come up with like, what are we missing? And I couldn't really. I mean, this is pretty comprehensive. And
I
again,
think so.
great list of questions.
And I do feel it's but I do feel it's reflective of the types of questions we would ask,
Yeah.
right? And some of them would be applicable to other districts, but I think contextually that reflect what we would ask.
Yeah.
We've tried to harvest, as many questions as possible. So, but if we do miss something, I think we have deliberately set up an iterative process so that we can, we'll have focus groups in the fall so that we can continue to develop and explore things that come up if we're missing anything.
Yep.
So it would be our intent, unless the board thinks otherwise, to do something similar for the staff.
Right. Tweak it a little
Tweak
bit
it.
along these lines, right?
Yep.
Great. I think that would be helpful. And try to get it out next week-ish.
Yeah, so we anticipate being able to bring the results back for the next meeting.
Wow, good.
It's ready to push the button. So we'll just
Great.
maybe communicate with the PTOs as you suggested.
Terrific. Thank you. Fantastic. Look at the timeline.
Well, we just reiterated when we're sending this out, and I kept the original timeline in order for you to see where the things are slipping in or what we've missed or what we've checked off, but we're pretty much on target here.
That's great. Okay. So then for our May meeting, we would be talking about looking at survey results. I think we probably want to have some conversation about implications from this committee to recommend we consider for board goals and objectives discussions. And I wanted to ask, do we think it's relevant or the right time to look at if other districts have communications policies that they're using? Is it worth us just getting some scope of what's out there? I'm open to feedback
So
on that idea.
There are some in some of the materials that I did a couple years ago.
Okay.
So that's one thing we could do is I think there was at one time, at that time, this is 2 years ago, but there was a CAVE model policy we could look at.
Okay.
I think I pulled a policy maybe from the national school boards. And then I looked at a couple districts, but I think it probably would be worth, if that's something we want to do, just taking a look at a couple neighboring districts.
Okay. I think it's just helpful to get to
Yeah.
dimensionalize the way we're looking at
Yes,
things,
I
right?
agree. Yeah.
Okay, so let's try to,
So we could send out what's there. Maybe take it out of that whole document because the
Yeah.
rest of but we could send out what we have to the committee
Yep.
to take a look.
okay, and we can have a conversation about those when we meet next time.
Yeah.
Okay,
I would just also say maybe give a heads up to the rest of the board that this survey is going out.
Yep.
I mean,
Oh, yes.
If they're
Yeah.
not watching.
well, if they're not watching
course
right
they
now, of
are.
course they'll catch up later. Because it's easy to do. All right, great.
Sorry, I'm
Please, yeah.
back on the survey question. The one thing I'm thinking about that I think we have deliberately not captured, but I want to just put it out there. There are informal communications like from teachers or staff members who are putting stuff up. Oh, we were on the playground. It was sunny today. We haven't captured any of that in the survey. I think that's on purpose, but I just want to mention it here because it is something we've talked about.
Yes.
That there's a layer of communication that is unregulated. Well, that doesn't come formally from the district.
Right. Okay, great. All right. Anyone have anything else for us this morning? Dennis, you good?
I'm good. Thank you.
We're all good?
Do you want to bring any other policies that are relevant to this? You just mentioned teachers posts and stuff, right? There are other use of technology, permission stuff that rolls into that. I don't know if you wanted to do that in terms of.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Policy, what you're talking about policies that
Well, tangentially impact like communications.
what can be used, how it can be
Yeah,
used,
yeah.
when, okay. Yeah, I think it's probably good to pull that
I'll
stuff
just
together
bring
and take a
ours. I
look.
won't bring everybody else's.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Okay. Okay, awesome. I think we're probably there.
We're good.
If nobody has anything else, we'll move to public comment. Michelle?
Good morning. If anyone in person would like to participate. Anyone online, please use the raised hand icon. There are no raised hands.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. John, all in favor? I think we're good. We're adjourned. Thanks, guys.
Bye all. Have a good weekend.